And Michelle and Vicky, if I could ask you to just keep an eye on the admission. Should be seeing lots of folks come in. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. We're just going to give another 30 seconds or so to allow time for everyone to move from the lobby into this main webinar room. Then we'll get going. Okay, so we still have folks coming in. We'll hear that little beeping noise for a few minutes, I'm sure, but I'd like to get started because we have a packed full webinar today and I don't want to waste any time. So I'm just going to pull, hopefully everyone can see my slides. Maybe if I can get a thumbs up or something like that that everyone can see, then that would be great. Okay, perfect, wonderful. Okay, so to my slides here. All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I'm the Habitat Program Manager of our Rights of Way as Habitat program here at the Canadian Wildlife Federation. We're really excited to bring you to the second installment of our winter webinar series this winter. Get to the next slide. All right, so we're going to begin with just a little bit of an overview of our controls. So many of you might already be familiar with Teams, but there's another function they're going to be using today. So you may be familiar with the chat function. Feel free to use this to connect with our team if you're having any technical difficulties. If you're having some troubles with audio, if you move to the far right of the screen, there is a More button. And just be sure that your audio settings are specific to your headset that you're using or any external speakers. We'll be using the Q&A button at the top of the screen to actually ask questions to our presenters. You are more than welcome to put these questions in throughout the presentation, but we'll be setting aside specific time at the end of the webinar to answer those. You may also use the chat function to introduce yourself in just a moment. So for good engagement today, we just are asking that you inquire and you share, that we create a common understanding. If you're asking a question, please just note to clarify any technical terms or acronyms just to make it accessible to everyone who is listening. Please be empathetic and assume good intent, be curious and listen. If you do disagree respectfully, and just keep in mind airtime when asking questions. And as we come together today in this electronic medium, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional Indigenous territories in which we're gathering from here, but also which each of you are gathering from today. So here in Canada's capital in Ottawa, we acknowledge that we're on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. And if you don't know the land in which you are joining us from today, I encourage you to take a look at this website that I have a picture of here. It's from nativeland.ca. I'm going to ask my colleague just to put that link in the chat, and you can take a look to see the Indigenous territory in which you're joining from. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, you can do that, and you can also tell us which Indigenous territory you're joining from too. So what has brought us here today? This is our winter webinar series through our Rights of Way as Habitat program, where we work collaboratively with land managers to restore the breeding and migratory habitat for the monarch butterfly, as well as many other pollinators. And we do this on utility, energy, and transportation rights of way. We do this in four communities in particular within Ontario: Southwestern Ontario, the GTHA, Eastern Ontario, and we've also recently expanded into Quebec. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, this is the second installment of our current series this winter. Our first one, we had Kate Arthur from the Essex Region Conservation Authority who presented in January. We have that recording as well as all the other recordings from our previous webinars through that second QR code on your screen. And our upcoming webinar in January, you can register now, and we're going to be having Victoria McPhail from the Eastview Pollinator Park, which is a landfill restoration site case study. We're excited about that. But first, we're going to start with today. So I'm really excited to have two speakers here today. Excuse me, Joanne Shajki from Conservation Ontario and Tara Gady from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. And so Tara is a program coordinator of the Watershed Strategies and Climate Research at the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. And Tara has been with the NPCA for over 20 years in the various roles throughout her tenure, including GIS, watershed planning, and currently watershed strategies and integrated watershed management, where she leverages her expertise in environmental stewardship and conservation management. And Tara is responsible for the integrative watershed management and sub-watershed strategy programs, as well as leading and supporting strategic initiatives such as natural asset management and non-point source modeling. And Joanne is Manager of Business and Development and Partnerships at Conservation Ontario, and she has over 30 years experience researching, designing, delivering, and managing stewardship and restoration initiatives at the local watershed and also provincial and national level. And she has negotiated and led many conservation restoration partnerships and programs. And Joanne is currently participating in emerging communities of practice to support conservation authorities as well as municipalities in Ontario in natural asset management. This is why we invited them today. I'm really excited for Joanne to go over with you who Conservation Ontario is, what is natural asset management, and then Tara is going to move further and discuss a case study with the Niagara region of Ontario and how they are assessing and valuing natural assets and providing a highlight of that with some maps and methods. And as I mentioned, we're really excited to have them here today because we want for you to be able to see an example of how you might be able to view native meadow restoration as a natural asset management component, especially as we recognize that there are many of you on the call who are looking to see how you might fit native meadow restoration within your day-to-day work, where you may be looking for support from other departments, support from superiors, and this might be an alternative way or a way that you just may not have previously considered doing so and integrating that. So I'm going to pass things over. Stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Victoria.
Okay.
I will share
yeah, Tara's going to share the screen. And I'm going to also request taking control.
Okay, can you see the presentation? Are we good?
We see your screen, but not in slide, not in presentation mode.
Oh. That's so interesting because we just did it. Okay.
We see your, there we go.
Yes, there we go.
And I'm going to request control. You should see that, Tara.
Not yet.
Okay. While I'm waiting for that, I just want to say thank you to the Canadian Wildlife Federation on behalf of Conservation Ontario and Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Tara Gady, who's with me. We always appreciate the opportunity to share information about conservation authorities at a national, for a national audience. So I'm going to see if I can move this, Tara. Were you able to?
Yep. I see you have. Okay. You should be good.
Okay. It's not moving forward.
Okay. Do you want me to move?
Sometimes you just have to click on the page first.
Oh, I
it
see.
should allow you to move forward.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay. So this webinar features some great work pertaining to natural asset management in Niagara watershed. Oops, I'm going to go back. We'll get this set right. I can't move it backwards. That's okay. So
I will.
the outline we had was to give you a sense of what we're going to present today. I'm first of all going to be providing an overview of Conservation Ontario and our member conservation authorities with a brief intro to what we've been working on to improve our knowledge and capacity to support municipal and conservation authority natural asset management. Tara that will then focus on the work in Niagara. She'll go through the various steps of the study from the inventory, which is really the foundation for all subsequent steps and analysis. And then she'll go through the condition assessment through to the dual valuations completed on the inventory. Tara will then share with you how Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, or NPCA, supported one of their local municipalities to help them meet the requirements under Ontario's regulation for asset management for municipal infrastructure. So unique to Ontario, conservation authorities, or CAs for short, are local watershed management agencies that deliver services and programs to protect and manage impacts on water and other natural resources. They do this in partnership with all levels of government, landowners, and many other organizations. This work supports the environment, economy, and quality of life for Ontario residents in an area of the country with the highest biodiversity and species under threat. This is significant also because 95% of Ontario's population lives within a watershed managed by conservation authorities, and that equates to approximately 40% of Canada's population. There are 31 conservation authorities operating in Southern Ontario and 5 delivering programs and services in Northern Ontario. And conservation authorities range in size from very large to small, which influences the programs and services they are able to offer. Each conservation authority has its own board of directors comprised of members appointed by local municipalities, and most are elected municipal officials. Funding to support various programs and services of CAs come from a range of sources, including various levels of government, including municipalities. Oops. So why were conservation authorities formed? Concerns were expressed by agricultural, naturalist, and sports groups in the 1930s and 40s. And it highlighted that much of the renewable resources of the province were in an unhealthy state as a result of poor land, water, and forestry practices. The combined impacts of drought and deforestation led to extensive soil loss and flooding. Leading conservation organizations and many practitioners within the provincial government believed that we could not protect Ontario's important natural resources from contamination, degradation, or depletion unless a more integrated watershed management approach was adopted using natural watershed boundaries. Conservation land and tree planting, forest management are some of the outcomes since CAs were established in 1946. So Conservation Ontario, we're a nonprofit corporation that represents the network of the 36 conservation authorities. Conservation Ontario is governed and funded by member CAs. Conservation Ontario has successfully delivered a number of initiatives, including 2 initiatives on behalf of conservation authorities to help Canada meet GHG reduction targets and protected area targets, as well as biodiversity and many more co-benefits. And the funds included Nature Smart Climate Solutions Initiative and the Canada Nature Fund. Conservation Ontario staff support CAs in the key areas listed here, and Conservation Ontario builds strategic partnerships, promotes collective positions and issues, as well as pursues financial information management and policy opportunities related to Conservation Authority business areas. Conservation authorities do a number of things. There are 5 listed here, including developing and maintaining programs that will protect life and property from natural hazards such as flooding and erosion. And we do this in partnership with municipalities and others. Develop and maintain programs that will conserve natural resources, ensuring Ontario's water resources are properly safeguarded, managed, and restored. This includes effectively managing impacts in Ontario water resources such as lakes, rivers, streams, and groundwater. And we protect, manage, and restore Ontario's woodlands, wetlands, and natural habitat. We develop programs that protect natural heritage and habitats and promote watershed stewardship practices that lead to healthy watersheds. We connect people to the natural environment through the lands we manage and own, as well as any of the educational programs we deliver. And not all conservation authorities offer the same programs and services. It depends on their capacity and regional priorities. I mentioned earlier, larger conservation authorities may be able to draw on more resources locally, which allows them and their partner municipalities to undertake a wider range of activities. Smaller CAs may be limited by financial and human resources. I think what will be of interest to this session is that many conservation authorities are involved in protecting natural features or areas through the acquisition of sensitive lands, tree planting, and other land management activities. I've mentioned previously too about the protection of watercourses, wetlands, and shorelines, as well as Great Lakes and large inland lakes and valley lands, as well as providing technical advice to do all this work. Conservation authorities are the second largest private landowner in Ontario and carry out various land management activities which protect, enhance, and restore the natural lands contained within conservation areas. And the activities are listed above, which support managing these lands for resilience. Another very important activity that conservation authorities do is monitoring. We monitor flood conditions and we monitor nature to track the health of our watersheds. Some of you may know about watershed report cards, which are produced every 5 years. Monitoring information is used to produce these report cards, as well as evaluate the progress of initiatives and actions for watershed health, and can be used to inform and support natural asset management planning. And so this illustration here, produced by Green Infrastructure Ontario, conveys how natural assets fall under the green infrastructure umbrella. They include forests, wetlands, meadows, and parks. I think many of you may have seen this illustration before. Asset management is a process for managing assets that helps decision makers balance service levels, costs, and risks. By definition, green infrastructure assets, also referred to as natural assets or nature-based solutions, are the stock of natural resources managed by government. These include wetland, forests, as I mentioned, the meadows, and other types of green infrastructure, such as urban trees and naturalized stormwater ponds. There has been an increasing recognition that nature has value and should be counted as an asset to be maintained and invested like other assets. Natural assets are the stock of natural resources or ecosystems that are relied upon, managed, or could be managed by local government or private landowners for the provision of one or more services to a community. Why include natural assets in asset management planning? They provide critical services and benefits for the community, people, environment, and the local economy. So natural asset management and managing natural assets are closely related concepts, but they have distinct focuses. The focus of natural asset management emphasizes the integration of natural assets into broader asset management systems, considering their value and the services they provide, such as water filtration, stormwater management, and climate regulation. Focus of managing natural assets is more about the practical day-to-day activities required to maintain the health and functionality of natural resources such as wetlands and forests. In summary, while natural asset management is a broader strategic approach that integrates natural assets into overall asset management, managing natural assets focuses on the specific practical actions needed to maintain the assets. I'm not going to go into detail here, but this is an asset management planning process, which follows 4 main steps that repeat over a specific life cycle for continuous improvement. Tara will provide you a real-life example of this process undertaken by NPCA and its partners. So in recognition of the role that CAs can play in supporting municipalities, as well as conservation authorities and their respective asset management planning, a team of CO and CA staff have been meeting. This has been since around 2023. A unique role that CAs can play in supporting a watershed-based approach to natural asset management or natural asset management for regional collaboration between municipalities. So our watershed management approach is very unique. I wanted to also acknowledge the team of CA staff that comprise the working group that's being established. I haven't mentioned the staff, but these are the conservation authorities that have been actively involved. The working group has outlined the role of CAs in natural asset management, and they're listed here. It includes CAs being leaders and leveraging their historical role in conservation to guide the integration of natural assets into asset management processes. Subject matter experts drawing on years of experience, CAs can contribute specialized knowledge to shape NAM initiatives, ensuring a comprehensive and effective approach to natural asset management. Asset managers, CAs can actively manage and protect natural assets within their jurisdictions. They can employ natural asset management to optimize the ecological, social, and economic benefits of the assets aligned within their mandate. They're data collectors and managers, and as stewards of environmental data, CAs play a pivotal role in providing the necessary information for informed decision-making in the natural asset management process. And finally, as leaders in education, CAs can act as educators, providing training and raising awareness among municipalities, CAs, and other partners about the importance of natural assets, the benefits, and the specific details on how to undertake natural asset management. One of the things the working group has done has created or developed a roadmap for to support the leadership of conservation authorities. I want to especially acknowledge Toronto Region Conservation Authority, Credit Valley Conservation, and Conservation Halton, who've been leaders among conservation authorities in this effort. This illustration highlights the themes of the roadmap and some outcomes we hope to achieve in the next couple of years. This includes the development of resources and knowledge sharing between CAs and their watershed municipalities. So I'm just about done before we introduce Tara. Current priorities for our working group, including finalizing the terms of reference for our working group and endorsement of our Conservation Ontario Council. Also implementing the roadmap actions, seeking funding and partnerships that support this work, and engagement in regional, provincial, and national initiatives and communities of practice. And as a few take-home considerations, final considerations, we just wanted to highlight that conservation authorities are excellent sources of information and data. Experts from the public, private sector, and other partners will help build capacity and guide through this process. And reiterating that local knowledge and expertise is necessary. You'll hear this from Tara. And finally, collaboration is always key in natural asset management and other initiatives that conservation authorities provide services in. So with that, I pass it on to Tara, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. As Joanne mentioned, we're excited to share some of the work we are doing in Niagara to improve our knowledge of asset management and using this knowledge to support our programs and also our municipal partners to meet the requirements under the Ontario regulation, the asset management for municipal infrastructure that Joanne had mentioned. First, I'll briefly introduce you to the Niagara area, appreciating this is a webinar with a national audience, so maybe not everybody is familiar with where we are located. So the Niagara Peninsula watershed is uniquely situated between two Great Lakes, Lake Ontario to the north and Lake Erie to the south. And the Niagara River flows south to north along the eastern boundary, and it is shared with the United States. The Niagara Peninsula watershed is a natural treasure of distinct cultural, geological, hydrological, and biological aspects that are not found anywhere else in North America. It is part of the Carolinian Life Zone, which is Canada's most biodiverse and threatened ecoregion. The Niagara Peninsula watershed boasts approximately 30% natural cover that provides critical habitat such as forested woodlots, slough forests, alvars, and coastal wetlands that support rich biodiversity and rare plants and animals. The watershed also includes several other notable natural features, such as the Niagara Escarpment UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, which bisects the peninsula running east to west and provides the backdrop to the famous Niagara Falls. The unique microclimate created by the lakes and the escarpment, in addition to our rich soils, support one of Ontario's most productive agricultural systems, including vineyards and tender fruit orchards. So we retained the expertise of Green Analytics. They're a consulting company at the forefront of natural asset analysis to conduct a natural asset assessment for our entire watershed. The objective of the project was to quantify and assess the condition of our natural assets through a desktop GIS exercise using the best available data and standards. We also want to quantify carbon storage potential and sequestration rates of the respective natural cover, essentially providing us with a baseline of the potential carbon storage and sequestration rates of our jurisdiction. And we also wanted to undergo a valuation of our natural heritage assets by replacement value and based on current levels of services, such as ecosystem services, such as carbon sequestration, stormwater management, recreation, and contribution to wildlife pollination. So why did we undertake this project? Well, we wanted to quantitatively and qualitatively evaluate our natural features. We wanted a science-based decision-making tool to not only assist our staff in making the best resource management decisions in many of our program areas, right? The output of this project provides us with that opportunity. Not only does it give us another tool in our toolbox to carry out our programming, but it also provides with another means of communicating the importance of our natural assets, right? It provides a different perspective. This information is critical in supporting our strategic goals and supporting our watershed management programs, our land acquisition programs, land planning, natural asset management, and of course, our targeted habitat restoration initiatives. So before I jump into the project, I thought maybe I'd quickly touch on some of the things to consider in case there's anyone out there that's perhaps thinking about undertaking a similar project. So geographic scope would be considered. Are you looking for something watershed wide or just sub-watershed basis? Perhaps you're a municipality and you're just looking for your political boundaries or a pilot area. Are you wanting to include only owned and managed properties by an organization, such as a municipality or conservation authority, or the entire sub-watershed or watershed area? Data is always a potential issue. What data do you have? Are there gaps? How can you address them? I mean, open data these days is a wonder, and there's lots of opportunity out there to get access to a wide range of data that could assist you in your project. Determine the organization of the data on the onset, right? The hierarchy for your asset registry. What assets would you like to be included? Are you going to include enhanced assets such as street trees or bioswales, engineered assets, the green infrastructure assets like permeable pavement? So these are considerations on the onset of your project. So the asset inventory, as Joanne noted, defines the type, location, extent of natural assets located within a desired geographic scope. So the inventory is critical as it provides the foundation which all other asset management tasks are based. So for our project, the data was organized into 3 different levels. Level 1 is a continuous area of natural cover, regardless of the land cover type. So this distinguished between the natural area assets, agriculture, and enhanced assets. Then level 2 further categorized these areas by specific land cover types. So, right, our forest, our wetlands, hedgerows, And then level 3 breaks it down even further into the detailed ecological land classification level, which is a system that provides a consistent description, identification, classification, and mapping of ecological land units in southern Ontario. So really the difference between a swamp thicket versus a coniferous forest versus a mixed hedgerow. So using our updated natural areas data, the inventory included all natural assets along with the agricultural assets using the latest Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness field inventory within our entire jurisdiction. So we included the agriculture in the inventory really just to get a fulsome picture of our watershed, but it was not included as part of the condition assessment or replacement cost, but it did play a part in the ecosystem services valuation. As previously mentioned, our inventory, we were able to support our municipal partner Fort Erie by extracting their boundaries from our watershed-wide analysis. And I will touch on this project later in this presentation. So forests can act both as sources and sinks of carbon dioxide, depending on their condition. So for instance, a forest fire releases carbon, making it a source of carbon dioxide. However, as the forest regenerates, it absorbs more carbon than it emits, turning it into a carbon sink. So to establish a baseline of potential carbon storage and sequestration rates, an integrated approach was implemented. So assessing the forest assets separate from the non-forest, it allowed us to leverage a more robust and sophisticated approaches available for these particular assets. The carbon budget model of the Canadian Forest Service was used for forest assets. And this model allows the estimation of carbon storage and sequestration values over time. Inputs required for the model include growth rates, ages, and species compositions of forested assets. Carbon sequestration rates are calculated by comparing the carbon stocks from one year to the next. Right, the growth rate of the assets relative to the decomposition determines the annual carbon accumulation. So young forests accumulate carbon rapidly, really due to their vigorous tree growth, while older forests store more carbon per hectare, but they have a slower accumulation rate as growth and decomposition rates are nearly balanced. Non-forest asset types were cross-referenced with average carbon sequestration rates based on land cover type, and these were informed by over 30 peer-reviewed studies. Each non-forest natural asset class was assigned a sequestration rate, focusing solely on sequestration rather than storage, because the model used is only applicable to forest assets. So estimating storage for non-forest assets wasn't feasible due to data requirements like forest age and growth rates. Further, for agricultural assets, management actions influence the carbon storage, as does the large proportions of agricultural lands that produce like a yearly or a multi-year crop that is removed from the land. So an assessment of carbon storage from the ag lands would really need to consider the specific management actions undertaken, as well as the particular crop or crops harvested from the land. And such analysis, this was beyond the scope of our current study. So drawing on the rates of sequestration from the assessment and to assign a monetary value to the carbon sequestered, two prices of carbon were used. The first carbon price is the national social cost of carbon for Canada. And these estimates include damages from a variety of climate change impacts, including, but not limited to, changes in net agricultural productivity, human health effects, property damage from increased flood risk, disruption to energy systems. And given that climate change damages are a function of the cumulative stock of greenhouse gas emissions, the social cost of carbon estimates increase over time as greenhouse gas emissions accumulate in the atmosphere. The second price is the minimum national carbon pollution price. This is the federal benchmark that was established in 2019. So from 2019 to 2022, the increase saw a yearly addition of $10 a ton to $50 a ton in 2022. From 2023 to 2020 or to 2030, the increase is an additional $15 a ton. So for this study, the values are in 2023 dollars, meaning there's $65 a ton for carbon dioxide equivalent. So next, I will walk you through the process used to evaluate the state of our natural assets on the landscape. So the condition assessment was undergone for the natural features, not the agricultural lands, as I mentioned earlier, through a desktop GIS exercise based on 9 parameters. And these were taken from the Canadian Standards Association guidelines, which have been established for natural asset inventories. And the guidelines speak to selecting criteria that looks at a physical context, so patch size and shape, proximity to water courses and other assets, and also a landscape context. So you're considering the features as a whole and how they're influenced by surrounding land use, like habitat connectivity. 6 parameters in the analysis for physical context were used, and these may feel familiar at times to those who are acquainted with Environment Canada's How Much Habitat is Enough guidelines for habitat restoration, which these are largely adopted from. So I'll briefly walk you through the parameters. So the objective of this indicator was to create a proxy for a condition based on the size of contiguous natural asset patches. Right? Larger habitat blocks, whether they're meadow, forest, wetland, they generally support far more diverse plant and wildlife populations. So in an urban context, as the distance from the edge to the interior decreases, human disturbances increase and negatively impacting these habitats. Thus, larger habitat blocks typically offer a greater range of higher quality habitats. I just want to note that the color scheme on this map is the same for the metrics all throughout the presentation, meaning green is very good down to red, which is very poor. Round patches are considered higher quality than smaller, more linear patches. The shapes that reduce the amount of edge are expected to have lower levels of these potential edge effects that I spoke to. Compact patch shapes protect interior habitats against harmful edge effects because they have a low edge to interior ratio. So in contrast, convoluted and elongated patches have a higher edge to interior ratio. So the condition scores for this metric are based on the compactness ratio. And this is calculated using the square root of the ratio of the patches area to the area of a circle with the same perimeter. So the scores range from 0 to 1, where 1 represents a shape with the least edge relative to its interior, like a circle, for example. The objective of this indicator is to capture the relative level of human use or activity adjacent to natural features, as reflected in road density. So the density of roads within 120 meters of natural assets with a higher road density ranking less favorably. The road density metrics were adopted from previous research that looked at how various densities of roads impacted these features. In addition to a natural asset size and shape, its location in relation to other natural assets within a given area also influences the types of ecological functions it can provide. So this indicator is the distance between each asset and the nearest water course, with assets in closer proximity rating higher than those further away. And again, these are taken from Environment Canada's How Much Habitat is Enough, but also Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry's Natural Heritage Reference Manual. The last 2 parameters speak to wetland and forest proximity to other features. Again, these metrics are taken from the Canadian Standards Association guidelines and adopted largely from How Much Habitat is Enough. So if you're looking to undertake a similar study, there is lots of reference material out there that you can refer to. 3 parameters were included in the condition assessment in terms of a landscape context. So increases in the extent of impervious surfaces within a watershed are generally known to have negative impacts to features, particularly for those downstream of the impervious areas. So this parameter assesses the extent of permeable land cover within 120 meters of an asset. So the higher the percentage, the more favorable the rating. Environment Canada's How Much Habitat is Enough guidelines recommend that 30 to 50% of watersheds be forested to enhance conservation and habitat quality. Higher forest cover generally means less management intervention is required. For wetland cover, the guidelines suggest protecting and restoring at least 10% of each major watershed, 6% of each sub-watershed, or 40% of the historic wetland cover, whichever is greater. This figure demonstrates the combined results of all the indicators, assuming an equal weighting between each. I would like to note that we are lacking an indicator for ecological context. Moving forward, this can be addressed through data collection on invasive species, species composition, on-site assessments on habitat condition. All of these would help respond to this gap. I do want to note, though, that it could also result in a reduction in our overall condition rating for MPCA's natural assets, since to date, this was a desktop GIS exercise. So there are two components to the valuation exercise. One is focused on the valuation of the assets, so the replacement cost, and one is focused on the valuation of the services, so ecosystem services. So in terms of valuation of the assets, replacement is the key indicator for determining value, but not simply purchase price, right? This includes additional costs that are associated with site preparation, initial delivery and assembly, as well as the expenses incurred in initial maintenance and monitoring activities. So these align with the traditional asset management and typically will follow a similar life cycle. The ecosystem service valuation process examines the values of the services derived from natural assets. So as mentioned earlier, natural assets provide critical services and benefits for the community, people, environment, and of course, the local economy. So they support climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts, recreational opportunities, habitat for wildlife, better air quality, protection from flood risks, and carbon uptake and storage. So when it comes to natural assets, the replacement process is notably more intricate compared to gray infrastructure, right? And this complexity arises from the time-intensive nature of establishing green assets, right? These could span several decades. Unlike gray infrastructure, green assets, such as our wetlands, our urban forests, they require a significant period to reach full maturity and functionality, making their replacement a long-term and a dynamic process. So the challenge really is that natural assets don't depreciate over time, but they appreciate. So the values derived from a study. So these values were derived from a study by Credit Valley CA, which involved interviewing subject matter experts and compiling restoration costs over 4 years for various project types. These costs were categorized into the 5 life cycle phases: planning, creation, inspection and maintenance, monitoring and managing, and removal. The database includes 3 cost estimates, low, moderate, and high, which reflects the wide range of reported costs. So the analysis used in our report used the low estimates. So 10.1 billion in 2023 dollars is likely an incredibly conservative figure. So really, the replacement cost analysis, it underscores the financial investment required to restore natural assets, speaking to the need for conservation and effective management to ensure continued service delivery from assets over time. Here listed are the ecosystem services that were included as part of our study. This is not an exhaustive list of services that natural assets provide, but these were the ones that were of interest to the MPCA. So the approaches employed to value the services varied by service type, but at a high level, they were based on existing norms and standards. In this regard, the valuation of the ecosystem services focused on the value of the final services provided to those who benefit from them. For this analysis, a benefit transfer approach was applied, and again, it varied depending on the service provided. But the simplest approach is typically to apply $1 per hectare transfer from one location to another. So I've already reviewed carbon sequestration, so I'll briefly review the other service valuations. So natural assets, parks, woodlands, they contribute to human wellness. Right? They provide unique settings for recreational activities like hiking, birdwatching, picnicking, as well as places for social and cultural interactions. So to value recreation, a value transfer approach was used, utilizing $1 per hectare estimates from previous research that is published on the Ontario government website. These estimates were then applied to the number of hectares of each of these land cover types that fall within MPCA watershed using the dollar per unit approach. Natural assets have the potential to play a significant role in regulating air quality. Trees, plants, vegetation, right? They act as natural air filters, absorbing pollutants and particulates, contributing to cleaner, healthier air. This improvement in air quality can reduce respiratory and cardiovascular health issues, which is increasing overall public health. So the value of air quality regulation was estimated based on avoided healthcare costs from exposure to air pollutants like nitrogen dioxide, ozone, sulfur dioxide, and fine particulate matter. The analysis used equations that consider population densities within the watershed to estimate these costs. The research focused on the leaf area index, so the overall extent of tree foliage of forested assets and their ability to regulate pollutions. Natural assets are crucial for stormwater regulation, managing water runoff, preventing floods, improving water quality. So the value of stormwater regulation was based on the ability of these assets to control and absorb water during heavy rain events. Values are derived from a Peel region study, assigning a per hectare value to forests, meadows, abatement capabilities. This analysis assumed that the site characteristics and stormwater services in the Peel study were scalable to MPCA natural assets and similar to those in our watersheds. Habitat preservation supports biodiversity and ecosystem balance by protecting species and their habitats. This ensures ecological stability and resilience while also providing clean air and water, recreation, and of course, educational opportunities. It sustains other ecosystem services, and although biodiversity is hard to value, environmental economics recognizes the importance people place on conservation through their willingness to pay for these efforts. So the habitat preservation value was adopted from research that assessed the value of urban and peri-urban green spaces through a meta-analysis of studies on willingness to pay for recreation, preservation, and aesthetic values. And then these equations, they were tailored to the MPCA scenario using our local data on natural asset areas, gross domestic product per capita, and population density. Pollination is crucial for agricultural productivity. Wild pollinators like honeybees, bumblebees, some bird species, just to name a few, help pollinate crops, boosting yields and supporting the economic stability of the agricultural sector. So to estimate the contribution of wild pollinators to crop productivity within our jurisdiction, the crop types were reviewed to determine those that are dependent on wild pollination and allocated a pollination crop dependency value that was adapted from existing research. So not all the crops found in our area required wild pollination, right? Some crops such as corn, winter wheat are wind pollinated, and even grapes. So if you're looking at the map, you may be wondering why there are large voids, a data void of the wild pollinator in these areas when they're outside of the urban areas and they're agricultural. Well, these are our grape growing areas, and grapes are wind pollinated. So in total, the ecosystem services valued through this assessment are estimated at between 331 million and 463 million per year, and this is considered a low estimate. And I do want to point out the wide range for such value under the carbon sequestration is the difference between the federal benchmark and the social cost of carbon values. So ecosystem service valuation is very much an evolving field. So these values are based on the newest research, and these are in 2023 dollars. So as I mentioned earlier, we were able to support one of our local municipalities with this project. Using the collaborative approach, the purpose of this project was to complete an inventory, condition assessment, a risk assessment, and evaluation of the municipally owned green infrastructure. So the outcome of this project was to serve as an input to the town of Fort Erie's asset management planning, as noted earlier, which was required under Ontario's regulation for asset management planning for municipal infrastructure. The final report also included draft levels of service objectives and performance metrics for consideration and further development by the town. This project was based on a foundation of collaboration from the very beginning. We worked as a team to develop the project charter, collect street tree data, shaping and conducting the risk assessment workshop with the support of our consultant, Green Analytics, to reviewing and editing the final report. Through this project, we leaned on each other's expertise, knowledge to deliver this work, and I think the outcome was much stronger because of it. Okay, so let's put the data to work. We now have a science-based decision-making support tool that can help inform multiple programs. So I've put some of them on the screen, but this is by no means an exhaustive list. So in terms of flood mitigation and water quality, natural asset management helps maintain and restore natural assets like wetlands or riparian buffers. They play a crucial role in flood mitigation and water quality improvements. By incorporating natural assets into watershed management plans, communities can enhance resilience to climate change and improve water resource management. Acquiring land with valuable natural assets ensures the protection of ecosystem services that provide essential services such as carbon sequestration, water filtration, habitat for wildlife, wild pollination, and the list goes on. This information can also provide KPIs or metrics to include in funding opportunities such as, potential carbon sequestration. And then, of course, natural asset management supports targeted habitat restoration by identifying critical areas for intervention and implementing strategies to restore ecological balance and enhance biodiversity. So in conclusion, natural assets play a vital role in enhancing human well-being and environmental health. They provide recreational opportunities, support social interactions, contribute to personal fulfillment, provide services that are crucial for stormwater regulation, helping manage water runoff, water quality improvement, wild pollination, carbon sequestration, just to name a few, and as I've reviewed throughout this presentation. So by preserving and investing in our natural assets, we can ensure a healthier, more sustainable and resilient future for both communities and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tara and Joanne. That was really fantastic. I love that last slide that you had up there in particular. When I was going through and reading all the different labels that you had and recognizing how each of those really applied to native meadow as well, that was a really nice visual amongst many of the other great visuals throughout the webinar. So we have a number of questions that are coming through on the Q&A. So just a reminder for those who are on the call, there is a Q&A button at the top of your screen. And if you have a question, we just ask you to submit it through there. So we have a number, so I'm going to get going if that's okay. So the first one, this is just asking for some more details on how the inventory and assessment process can be replicated by other regions, municipalities, watersheds, etc. Specifically, how much data is publicly available, what tools are required, and how much staff time is necessary?
So I'm not sure the region, where the question is coming from. In Ontario, we have a significant amount of open data that is available through the Ontario government. Your conservation, so I really can only speak to Ontario, speaking to that, but so the conservation authorities are a great resource for your natural heritage information, which was the base data of the natural asset assessment. So if your local conservation authority does not have this data, this information is available. It's called LEO, Lee Inventory Ontario. You can get some natural heritage information from there. The metrics that were used, there is a document, the Canadian Standards Association has outlines of the parameters that should be used for the condition assessment, which also inform, we're informed by how much habitat enough, which is Environment Canada and Climate Change's document. We built capacity through a consultant, but your conservation authorities are the subject matter experts of the landscape. So our project was very much a collaboration with our consultant because some of the parameters we did tweak for a landscape context and for what we required to fulfill our programming and to support our municipalities.
And actually, continuing off of the parameters that were selected, how did you narrow down which parameters to include or exclude from the assessment?
The CSA guidelines, they're actually outlined. These were the parameters outlined in the guidelines, which have come out for natural asset assessments. They came out, I believe, early last year. The parameters, like some of the distances, like less than a kilometer in between features, we adapted from how much habitat is enough to put more of an ecological context to it. So there are a lot of resources available for those who are looking to go down this journey.
And I'll just add to that, one of the reasons why, Conservation Ontario and conservation authorities have established our working group is to identify ways we can share information, not only between ourselves, but our partner municipalities. And then there are communities of practice being developed or being established at other scales as well. And I think the more we learn and share our experiences in natural asset management, we'll be able to share more and learn more and do more.
Yes, and just to add to Joanne's point, all these initiatives that she mentioned, it's great because it's providing a consistent approach along the landscape of how to do these valuations.
To continue off of resources, what software technologies would you recommend are best to conduct natural asset inventories?
We did a GIS desktop exercise, and in-house we use ArcGIS. So I think a GIS-based program, whether that's QGIS or is sufficient for the analysis.
Perfect. And this question here is asking, what are the minimum requirements to include in a municipal natural asset management plan according to the Ontario Regulation 588/17? And are all enhanced GI assets required? Hopefully that makes sense to you because that's going over my head on asset management.
So I can start, Joanne,
Yeah.
if you want to add
Go
to
ahead.
that.
Yep, and then I can follow up. Yeah.
Yeah, under the regulation, just the municipally owned natural assets are mandatory, and that includes any like wetlands, forests, or meadows, like these natural features that were in the presentation, but they only need to inventory the ones that are on their property, as well as the stormwater ponds, which would be included in their regular asset management plans. If they have any other green infrastructure like permeable pavement or bioswales, but those aren't super common. Those are the ones that are required, but just on municipally owned property. But a lot of jurisdictions are taking a systems approach and doing their entire political boundaries or based on a sub-watershed as well. Do you have anything to add to that, Joanne?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I think there's probably a concern right now as to the requirements coming up, like, and the timing of being able to do some of this when maybe some municipalities haven't even started. And so, do you have any comment on that, Tara, based on your experience?
Yeah, it was because the regulations aren't very detailed. I think everybody's taking an approach that they're able to do, and they're starting
Somewhere.
They're starting somewhere and really reaching out to their conservation authorities for assistance in this area.
Yeah.
Just going to take a quick two more questions because we're running out of time. Hopefully you don't mind staying on an extra minute. Great, that's fantastic. Do you know of any funding opportunities to develop a natural asset management plan or conducting natural asset inventories for those who are looking to do so?
I can maybe just start at that at a high level. I know this has been an interest of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities So there's certainly interest at that level to identify ways of supporting through their various programs. Apart from that, Tara, do you have any other ideas? We're always supporting resources and the need for them to do this work. So
I know
think
some
the more that do, go ahead.
some municipalities have got some funding from the Greenbelt Foundation as well.
It's always helpful
Again,
information.
yeah. Again, as municipalities highlight how important their need for resources is, I think that's really important to share that.
And one final question, do you anticipate that some of the asset condition assessments or valuations will change once you consider the needs of species at risk?
I suspect the valuations could change once we go on site. So moving forward, this was a desktop exercise. It's providing us with a baseline, but like it is a desktop exercise. There are rapid assessments you can do, so you can send out teams, and that is our goal, is to move forward and at least start with our properties and get a better inventory and ecological idea of the health and the state of these assets. So I suspect that that would change the valuation.
And I know I said that was the last question, but just one final question is, what advice do you have for municipalities or other groups who want to partner with a conservation authority and the best way to connect with them?
Well,
Yeah.
think conservation authority staff are very accessible.
Yeah, we have
Joanne?
Conservation Ontario. We have, if you want to reach out to understand or learn what conservation authority is in your jurisdiction, definitely check our website, conservationontario.ca, and there is Find Your CA map, where you can link to that link to the conservation authorities or find the information about how to reach conservation authorities. It's a really good question. I see here we don't have a conservation authority in our area. What could be our options to complete an assessment? I would say definitely reach out to municipalities in your area, neighboring municipalities. There are also private sector companies and non-government organizations who do this work as well, in addition to conservation authorities. So as we develop the communities of practice, the resources, I think there will be more information more information on who can help and assist in this work.
Fantastic. And with the recording that we'll have from the session today, when that gets sent out, we'll also put a link to Conservation Ontario and link to that map. And then for other information, you can peruse the website to continue to learn more. I just want to say thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Tara, were you going to say something?
Immediately when this started in the chat, if you scroll up, is a link to the summary report of the study that I just shared with you.
Perfect. Yes, and we can link to that as well through the recording as well for more information.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Tara and Joanne. We really appreciate you taking your time today to present to us. This was very educational and directly applies to native meadow restoration. And I really hope on the call we're able to think a little bit differently about how they might incorporate that. And yeah, that's all for today. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. There's never enough time, but please feel free to reach out to us following this session. So thanks again, Victoria and Canadian Wildlife Federation.
Okay, thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.